Lindsay, can you give us a little bit of your background with this documentary, please?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching the film. I was the producer on the film, which in the documentary world means I do a little bit of everything, to be honest. So I was on the project from start to finish. I was in the field while we were shooting, and then oversaw post-production and helped eventually with the promotion of the film.
Okay,
And
hopefully.
it was the first film I did with Alexandra, and we are still working together today.
Thank you. Hopefully, Lindsay's background is going to help you all think of some great questions, but we have one to start with. In some scenes, it seemed as though the women had a bigger adjustment to make to US culture, but they were more open and flexible to making those adjustments than the men. Is that a fair observation in your experience? Please explain why or why not.
Yes, we only filmed with this specific group of people, so I can only speak about them, but that was definitely something that became very clear to us pretty much right away. A lot of the women, Yasmin, who, the idea of driving hadn't even occurred to her really prior to this. And then she was just so gung-ho to do it. So in many ways, while the women had, the most change to go through, they really embraced it. And I think for the men, in fairness, it was much harder because so much of their identity had been wrapped up as being the head of a family and as a provider. And they all had some type of career before they left Syria. And so to find yourself in a new country, having to learn a new language and being expected to provide for yourself and your family really as soon as possible was a daunting task, and really in many ways it was very emasculating that the thing that they had been able to do and provide was now so challenging.
As we were going through the film, I wrote down some just phrases that came up, like the one gentleman saying, "Over my dead body, that my wife will work." It was really, seeing someone else's culture, it's always hard to really understand what that always means, but it was really pleasant for me to hear her say later that he had really come around to wanting his wife to get a job. But we just seem to continue to see scenes of the US refugee workers trying to convince him, I thought in a really nice way, that they understood his concerns, but probably his wife was going to have to work too.
Yeah. Well, and some backstory on this. When I was working on this film, I was pregnant with my son, and over the course of production, it became clear to Khaldun that I was pregnant. And he would always joke with me. He was like, "The Americans are very serious about having women work. The pregnant lady's working." And so he would always, we would have a little joke about that. So.
Thank you so much. Lindsay, as you worked, was this your first experience working with refugees?
It was. I mean, I've been working on documentaries for 15 plus years and on a variety of topics, but never anything to do with refugees. And part of the reason I wanted to do it, of course, was, it was so topical. And, I was constantly reading about this in the newspapers, watching, the news about this, but, feeling disconnected. And I think part of the reason I love making documentary films is it allows me to sort of get to know someone intimately and embed in a different community and really get an up close and personal experience with a world I might not have access to. And so that was really important to us as we were making the film is, this wasn't a big issue film. We weren't trying to fill it with talking heads or facts about the war and what was going on and refugee and immigration policy, but we wanted to focus in on like what it actually meant on the day-to-day, the person-to-person level to live in that experience. So that was sort of always our goal from the beginning of the film, is how do we keep it rooted in the personal as much as possible.
Thank you. I would like to say to everyone in the audience, if you would like to voice your question rather than post it in the chat, just raise your hand, and Posey, our technician, is going to help me because I can't see all the faces at all the time, but we'd love to have you involved in that way if that's your preference too. So back to that question then, Lindsay, what was the most striking thing for you having it be your first time working with refugees? What did you come away with that was the most surprising or the most impactful?
One of the things that I was really surprised with was the humor. You know, it was funny. We premiered this film at Sundance, and we had a sales agent, and he'd seen the film, but you know, all of a sudden there was all this laughing, and he was like, later he said to me, he was like, "Was that our film?" And I was like, "Yes, it's the funny refugee film." And you know, it sort of hadn't occurred to me when we set out to make a film about this very serious topic with people who are in an incredibly stressful period in their lives, that it would also be funny. And I think that that was a beautiful thing to discover, because you know, that's part of our resiliency as humans. And it was a way to connect despite the language barrier. There was always a way to sort of find humor in a moment between the people we were filming and the crew, but also the way that they, you know, went about the world. And so that was surprising in a very positive way.
Thank you. That is so true. You do see that across many cultures. Sometimes I think some of us take our lives too seriously, and we could learn from that ability to laugh and help let that laughter or ability to look at something in a different way get us through. So thank you for sharing that. And I have another phrase on my notepad where the woman was on the phone and her neighbor came over, and she said, the person on the phone said, "Who's there?" And she said, "Oh, this is my new friend. She makes me laugh from the heart," which to me says that there's a deeper existence maybe than sometimes I think we get so busy here in this country that we forget about those deep pleasures. Did you see that among?
Yeah, and I think a big part of that was, you know, it seemed like for many of the people that we filmed, sort of soon into their journey here, when they were able to connect with other refugees and then other Syrians as well, it was a really special moment to sort of know that they weren't alone. And that was a big thing that in refugee resettlement and the IRC is making sure that people aren't, whenever possible, are being resettled in a community where there are other people that they can relate to. And I think that that was really, like, I just remember Khaldoon's excitement when he heard like Muhammad was his neighbor and they had never met, and then to watch them meet, it was like they were old friends. And so I think that there was this very deep connection because, you know, he could relate to his very unique experience. I have to say, one of the things that often comes up in Q&As and is sort of how we dealt with the language barrier, which was a big challenge for this film. Not only had I never worked on a film about refugees, I actually hadn't worked in a film in a foreign language before. And so that, you know, our director Alexandra had her first film she made in India, but it just presented a lot of logistical challenges. You know, at first, you know, we weren't traveling with anyone in our crew who spoke Arabic. and we were relying on the IRC often to interpret, but then they weren't always with us. We were going to people's homes. So we slowly had to figure out ways to involve interpreters with us and to figure out ways to use the Google Translate on our phones. But it was really amazing to watch our cinematographer shoot, often not knowing what was going on sometimes, and being able to have to tune into the body language and the gestures that people were making. And sometimes we weren't really sure what was going on. And I think there was a lot of special moments that sort of came out of that by really focusing in on what was going on, just emotionally in the room, through cues of people's, the tone of their voice or body. And then eventually, you know, we did have all of the footage translated, which was another intense part of the process. There was over 300 hours of footage that we shot, which is often something, you know, people don't understand about a documentary, is that it was a 90-minute film, but you know, we have over 300 hours of raw footage to make that 90-minute film. So our editor had to go through quite a bit.
That's very helpful to know that. I look at the audience members, and I know that we have people who work or have worked in helping professions. There's also some folks who have lived in other countries, and I'm thinking that you all may have some interesting perspectives related to that. So, you know, don't hesitate with your questions. And one of those people I was thinking about has sent in a question or a comment. I'm sorry, things are moving for me here. This was a very interesting film with many insights to the struggles of refugees. Thank you for that. And sometimes I make fun of people that tell me they can't move through the chat, and now I'm having trouble with it. So I'm sorry, everybody. Katya, I'm trying to find the rest of your question. Okay. Anne would like to know, do you have any updates on the families?
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about this because in the last year, I feel like we've sort of lost touch with a lot of them. Batul, gosh, I think she just celebrated her 1-year wedding anniversary, or is it 2? And they moved to Michigan, her and her new husband. Maria actually, and we're going to post this on our Facebook page or our Instagram or both, for the film, but Maria is just graduated from college and is going to be starting dental school. So she has a GoFundMe to help pay for tuition. So we're going to post that on our site. Muhammad also moved to Michigan, and that was soon after the film. And his wife had a baby soon after we finished filming. Khaldun and Yasmin, I think, are still in Baltimore. I haven't talked to them in a while. Medea and Leah are still very good friends. I just saw that they took the kids to Disney on Ice recently. She's still doing cooking. She's bounced around between several jobs. I know she just did another event at the local church. So they're all in various states. I think everyone now has their green card. Last I heard, I think that was everyone. Yeah. I mean, so they all arrived in 2016, which it's sort of hard to believe they've been here for that period of time.
Well, and related to the arrival time, and I think maybe a lot of people wondered about this, we have a comment. I think that 8 months is not long enough for helping them adjust to America. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, what's so interesting is that it really varies, even in the IRC. So it depends on state and local funding. So I think, 8 months was sort of an average amount of time. some of the offices in Texas had less. I think Utah at the time provided service for a period of 2 years, and that was the longest. I mean, I think, you know, even 8 years could be not enough time. I mean, there's a lot of challenges. I mean, I always thought, you know, what would I do if I arrived in another country that I didn't speak the language? You know, it would take me forever to be acclimated. So, but I think also, I mean, there are additional services available to them at the IRC. After that 8-month period, it wasn't as if they were, you know, pushed out. There were other programming like helping with the green card. If you were gonna wanted to buy a house eventually, there was a program for that. There was referrals for legal assistance. But I mean, there's only so much funding, and there was really had to be that push that often felt, you know, unfair, but really there was no other choice to try to get people self-sufficient as quickly as possible.
We're getting close to the end of our questions, but there's some great stuff here. So one of the most universal moments in the film for me was the relationship between the daughters who had been independent in Syria, and now mom was trying to rein them in here in the US. Do you have a specific universal moment from the film related to that?
Well, not, you know, one of the things that I found very universal in working on this film, and as I mentioned earlier, I was pregnant while making this film with my first child, only child. And there was something about becoming a mother during the process of this that I felt like I connected with the women in the film in a way that maybe was intensified as I was about to become a mother. And I thought about, you know, that responsibility in terms of the way it drove them to make sure their children were safe, to do everything they could to get them acclimated to the US, to get them here, to help them in school, to get a job, to learn how to drive if they had to, and to see that motivating factor, you know, felt very universal, that feeling of wanting to protect your family, and being able to just whatever it took to press ahead for them.
There's such rich material throughout the documentary. Really, you're getting a lot of thank yous for putting this together. And there's a mention that immigrants in general can relate to many of those situations and feelings they experience when settling in the United States. And, you know, I think there's a few we could put together here, but the reason for creating this film, was it for advocacy? Was it for education? Was it all of the above? Can you identify? I know you said it was a hot topic.
Yeah, I mean, certainly education, outreach, advocacy was a big part of it. I mean, I think our goal really was, let's take this news story that can be overwhelming and sort of abstract. Let's take it from the headlines and the numbers and make it personal. Let's put a real face to some of these issues, because it's an easier way to connect. You know, you can read about what's going on and the numbers of people coming and the devastation, but to actually see someone who you can relate to and is just trying to, you know, put food on the table and make sure their kid gets into a good school and figure out how to make a living, do something you know, that's challenging in their personal life. Like, those are all relatable experiences that are human and universal. So we really wanted to do the advocacy piece through that. You know, it was very important to us. The IRC was very welcoming, but it wasn't a film for the IRC. We thought it would do positive things in terms of promoting refugee issues, but it was never to promote the IRC. But they were great collaborators, and very open to letting us in, which we really appreciate. They really opened the doors and welcomed us. and really just wanted to get the word out about what was going on. So.
Well, thank you. A final question, the torture that was mentioned on the gentleman who had a problem with his leg. One of our audience members would, if you believe his children knew of those experiences before the film. Could you tell if that was new to them?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. You know, I guess I assumed that they had. Gosh, when that scene was filmed, I you know, they had only been here for, that was the first few days. So, you know, I remember thinking, are the kids exhausted and this isn't resonating like fully what, but I think that I always assumed that they knew.
I want to thank you very much, Lindsay. As I said, we have people saying it was a great, powerful film. And we just appreciate so much. As a final question, did you develop an idea of how Americans could improve their relationships and assistance or collaborations with refugees?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway for me was watching Leah make a huge difference in Medea's life. So, you know, the issue seems insurmountable, right? But then there are these small, very meaningful things you can do on a local level, of one-to-one level, like, you know, something as simple as like helping someone fill out the school forms for public school, which are like, I was just doing and so daunting. You know, helping someone go to accompany them when they're getting, you know, services, or going to the doctor, or going to the grocery store, someplace where language is going to be an issue. Even, you know, connecting with a family and saying, what do you need? Like, what can we buy for this family, and have your community organization sponsor just a few people. And those few people, it makes a huge difference. And I think it's such a positive experience for everyone involved. But I think it's just that really local, one-to-one human connection that makes a huge difference.
All right, so I'm going to end with a comment from Liz. This was so great. It is super important to consider the different experiences in the world today. I think the bits and pieces about the children acclimatizing to the United States and working through the changes and trauma they may have experienced was very eye-opening. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you all so much for watching. This was really a nice experience. Thank you.
Okay, we appreciate your stepping in, Lindsay, and everybody have a great evening. This time we will end the Zoom, but we encourage you to come back to the International Fair through YouTube. The next event is West African Dance and Music by Lanaya Drum and Dance out of Austin, Texas. See y'all later.